the arid lands of Asia, lands of contradiction. The sandy deserts of India are separated from the parched interior by the mighty Himalayas. In their rain shadow lie the deserts and dry grasslands of China and Mongolia. The stony Gobi Desert is further from the sea than any place on earth. Fierce summers are followed by bitter winters. North of the Gobi, on the grasslands of the Mongolian steppe, temperatures can plunge to minus 60 degrees. Like the nomads and their domestic horses, the wild animals are tough and resilient. They thrive in the extremes of Asia's arid heart. The long winter is ending on the steppe grasslands, home to a wild animal the Mongolians know as Taki, the spirits. Westerners call them Przewalski's horses. They're the only true wild horses in the world. The 7 mares of this herd are pregnant. Their foals will be born in a month or 2, in the short summer, when they'll have the best chance of survival. Taki are distinguished by short, upright manes and stripes on the backs of their legs. They're closely related to the ancestors of domestic horses, but Taki have never been tamed. The Mongolians have named the stallion of this herd Khan, after their famous ancestor Genghis Khan. In the 13th century, Genghis Khan rode out from here to create the largest empire the world has ever seen. The Mongol Empire spanned 5,000 miles of grassland stretching across Asia into Europe. Like the Taki and Mongolian gazelles, Genghis Khan and his warrior tribes were nomads, constantly on the move in search of good grazing. Mongolia remains a sparsely populated land of nomadic herders. For countless generations, the nomads and their herds have lived alongside the wildlife of the steppe. To the herders, demoiselle cranes are symbols of good fortune. To harm them would bring bad luck. The cranes have their own strategy for surviving the extremes of the steppe. They escape every winter and return in spring to re-establish breeding territories. The arrival of a male joining his mate ruffles territorial feathers. During the breeding season, each pair defends an exclusive territory a few hundred yards across to ensure they get the food and water they'll need to raise a family. Once they've agreed on boundaries, the couples turn their attention to each other. Cranes are long-lived and often pair for life. Before they breed, they renew their bonds in a demoiselle's pas de deux. Like all demoiselle cranes, this pair have returned to breed in the valley where they were born. To get back from their wintering grounds in India, they have flown 2,000 miles over the Himalayas. The final leg of this astonishing journey was across the Gobi Desert, the bleak center of Asia's arid heart. Gobi means stony. Strong winds have stripped the soil, leaving only stones, polished to a shine by the fierce heat. There's very little water. At the puddles that pass for water holes, animals often have to dig to find moisture. As summer temperatures soar to 120 degrees, any water soon evaporates, leaving only soda crystals. The desolate Gobi is home to the world's only wild camels, the Bactrian camels. Little more than 1,000 of these two-humped nomads remain, roaming the deserts between China and Mongolia. Two females and their month-old calves have joined forces to be safer from predators such as wolves. Camels are superbly adapted to the desert. Bushy eyebrows and double lashes protect their eyes from sand, and they can clamp their noses tight to keep out dust. Soft padded soles stop their feet sinking into sand. Camels can go for up to 10 days without water. Their humps hold reserves of fat to sustain them while they wander the desert in search of food. The females are shedding their thick winter coats. The summer ahead will be short, but intensely hot. Great gerbils have a different strategy for surviving the desert's extremes. They go underground. The uneven surface of their colony conceals an extensive network of burrows that provide shelter from winter cold and summer heat. The first litter of the year has just ventured above ground. They sniff each other constantly for the reassuring smell of family. Great gerbils are one of many rodents who've adapted to the desert. They get all the moisture they need from plants. But even the best adapted desert shrub depends on occasional, unpredictable rain. Rain might fall on some parts of the desert and not others. If it comes, it's a blessing. In most years, only 2 inches of rain falls, most of it in summer. Desert plants can wait a whole year for a single shower. When it comes, they respond rapidly. But almost as quickly as water appears, the desert air sucks it away. A strange parasitic flower steals water and nutrients from the roots of desert shrubs, enjoying a growth spurt after the rain. But its bright flowers won't last long in a drying wind. During the day, beetles write their signature in the sand. But other tracks belong to animals that come out only in the cool of night. The hairy-footed jerboa is a relative of the larger great gerbils. Also known as a kangaroo rat, the jerboa leads a solitary life. It's much more adventurous than the great gerbils, and may travel more than a mile each night to find food. It's a skilled digger, busiest just before dawn. In only 10 minutes, a jerboa can dig a hole a couple of feet long, where it will hide from the heat of the coming day. Great gerbils are also good diggers. By continually living and burrowing in one place, they reshape the environment to suit their needs. They're like gardeners, turning the earth, fertilizing it with their waste, and living off the plants it nurtures. Their gardening strategy has stood the test of time. Although each gerbil only lives for 2 to 4 years, some of their colonies are centuries old. Gerbils are great hoarders. They stockpile in spring in case there's a summer drought, and in autumn they accumulate for winter. They spend long periods cropping the lush salsola bushes, which flourish because of the pruning and manuring they get from the gerbils. The youngsters grow quickly and soon learn to harvest for themselves. They must also learn to keep an eye out for danger. A quick retreat foils the black kite, who continues to hunt, scanning the desert with sharp eyes. A female buzzard hovers above her nest as her paler mate delivers his catch. He's left a vole, which she shares between their chicks. Birds of prey are feared by all small desert animals. A vole spends as little time as possible above ground. A lizard relies on camouflage and stealth, which sometimes isn't enough. A luckless lizard is lunch for the buzzard chicks. The male buzzard will be a constant presence in the summer sky as he hunts for his growing family. Summer starts later on the more northerly steppe where the demoiselle cranes are just beginning their family. Their nest is a simple scrape of pebbles in short grass. When the female returns from feeding, she rolls her egg before settling. She'll incubate the egg for a month while her mate patrols their territory. Cranes raise just 1 or 2 chicks a year. As the herders move their horses to and from water each day, the female sits tight on her precious egg. Khan and his herd are feeding on lush summer grass by a small river. Five Taki foals have been born in the previous month. They boost the numbers in Khan's herd to 18. Life seems idyllic, but it hasn't always been easy. In 1968, Przewalski's horses were driven to extinction in the wild. Since the early 1990s, animals bred in zoos have been released in areas such as here, in Huste Nuru National Park, now home to more than 100 wild Taki. Khan is the dominant stallion in a herd of 7 mares and their offspring. There's a clear hierarchy within the group, but there are also strong bonds between individuals, which they reinforce by mutual grooming. A low-ranking horse who tries to join in is chased off. The last mare to give birth is coming into heat. Khan and some of the young stallions cluster round to see if she's ready to mate. Khan's sniffing tells him she's not yet ready. The mare lashes out at the unwanted attention. Khan leaves. When he judges the time is right, he'll chase the youngsters away. Domestic cows have also been attracted to the rich grazing. Khan considers them a threat. Cattle compete for food, but it's Mongolia's 3 million domestic horses that pose the greatest threat to the Taki's long-term survival. The 2 species have different numbers of chromosomes, but can still interbreed. The risk of Taki genes being swamped by domestic horse genes is very real. But if Khan has his way, this domestic herd won't stay long. For today, at least, Khan is the winner. He asserts his supremacy with a pile of dung. The domestic stallion moves off before he gets hurt. The Taki's grassland home is shaped by another much smaller animal. Marmots are the rodent gardeners of the steppe. Unlike the desert gerbils, marmots are long-lived. This female could live to be 10 or even 15 years old. She didn't give birth until she was 3, and she may not breed every year. Marmots face many threats. The most serious comes from herders, who kill more than 1 million a year for fur and food. Because demoiselle cranes are symbols of good fortune, that's a danger this chick won't face. Within hours of hatching, it's following its parents. The adults are looking for seeds and insects for their chick. Dung from the domestic herds is a rich source of beetles and worms. The parents keep an eye out for danger. They may not have a burrow to escape to, but they do have bravado. The cranes are in a race against the seasons. They have just 2 months before they have to leave their summer home. By then, their chick must be able to fly. But the family will stay together until the following spring, when they will return to their valley. The end of the short summer is already in sight. Grassland flowers rush to bloom and seed as the first frosts turn the steppe gold. Fat and well-fed, the young marmots are ready to hibernate as soon as the first snow falls. The coming winter will be the first true test of the young wolf's hunting and survival skills. In a sheltered valley, flies are in a frenzy of late afternoon mating. They won't last the winter, but their eggs will. Two Taki are braving the swarms to feed on the rich valley grasses. One was the first male born in Khan's herd. His name Munlai means firstborn. He and his half-sister have been chased from the herd by their father. It's the stallion's way of preventing inbreeding. High on a windy ridge away from the flies, Khan feeds with his group. They've lost one foal to wolves which attacked late one night, but the remaining animals are in peak condition. The 4 surviving foals are growing their first thick coats. Their places in the hierarchy of the herd reflect the status of their mothers. Khan, as always, grazes on the edge of the group, keeping an eye on the herd. The herd instinct is very strong. Munlai and his half-sister have teamed up for company as they search for another herd to join. But they'd rather be back with their family. Khan sees them coming. He heads off to drive them away again. The rejected pair retreat. Their father is too fierce to confront. They'll keep looking for a home. The search will be hardest for Munlai, who will have to challenge a stallion for control of a herd. Unsettled, Khan moves his mares away, pushing from the back. Several herds use this river valley, and they often meet. Ahead are 4 young stallions. The bachelors have their eyes on the mares. They just continue on their way. But Khan has other ideas. He'll tolerate potential rivals even less than his own adult children. He quietly places himself between the stallions and his band. The young interlopers are easily discouraged. They're not yet ready to pick a fight with Khan. The top bachelor stallion herds the others as he hopes one day to herd mares. Khan asserts his authority, rounding up his group. He snakes from one side to the other, his head low. The mares are strong-willed and lash out. Their hooves can hurt, but Khan persists, pushing them where he wants to go. Khan has controlled this herd for 5 years and is still in his prime. One day he'll be toppled by a younger, stronger stallion, but for now he's secure. Autumn is a time of gathering. Families of demoiselle cranes feed in big flocks as they prepare for their migration back to India. To escape the harsh winter of their homeland, these great travelers will set out on an arduous journey that may take them as long as 3 weeks. Huge herds of Mongolian gazelles, up to 30,000 strong, also gather in the grasslands. They've spent the summer in smaller groups, grazing where they can, but the coming of the rut brings them together. This year, summer rains, normally such a blessing, have become instead a curse. More than 3 times the usual rain fell. The soils are too sodden to drain the water away. Months of walking in water and mud have taken their toll. The herds are full of limping animals. The gazelles are suffering from highly infectious foot rot. The painful rot starts on the soles of the feet. The sick animals lose their appetite and are eventually unable to walk. Each body has the telltale swollen ankle of foot rot. This isn't the first time unpredictable rains have devastated the gazelles, and it won't be the last. Nearly a quarter of them have died, but in the next good year, numbers will bounce back. The herds move on, heading for winter rutting grounds. The greatest pain a sick gazelle can suffer is to be left behind. High above the Himalayas, 4,000 demoiselle cranes arc across the highest mountains in the world. They've already flown 1,200 miles and climbed to an efficient flying height of 23 or even 26,000 feet. Fierce headwinds make their epic journey even more challenging. If the cranes lose height, they must circle in search of thermals of rising air, which they can ride back up to cruising altitude to continue their journey. But sometimes they just circle for hours. Cranes still have 600 miles to fly before they reach their wintering grounds. The deserts of India are very different from the land of their birth, but they have many reminders of their homeland. As on the steppe, animals live alongside people in the hot coastal desert. Chinkara, or Indian gazelles, are related to Mongolian gazelles. The shifting, waterless dunes can only support small groups of chinkara that get all the moisture they need from plants. Males mark out small mating territories by rubbing bushes with scent glands on their foreheads. They also leave small piles of dung as claims of ownership. It'll soon be the rutting season, and the battles have already begun. Males fight over territorial boundaries and the right to mate with females who pass through. As the rutting season gets closer, the contests will become more intense. Until recently, Chinkara shared the edges of the sandy desert with wild asses, relatives of the Mongolian Taki. But the asses, or gorku, are now only found on salty mudflats known as the Ran, the desolation. In most years, the monsoon floods the low-lying mudflats. But this year the summer monsoon didn't come. A few showers greened the plants, but the Ran didn't flood. Herds of females and their young return to the mudflats each morning, led by a dominant mare. Gorku stallions don't belong to a herd. The stallion who gets mating rights will usually be the one who controls the best grazing area. The herd passes through a territory belonging to an old stallion locals have named Bandia, meaning no tail. For the past few years, he's held the prime territory and fathered most of these foals. But earlier this year, a young stallion drove him away, and the mares aren't interested in stopping in his new area. They're heading instead towards better grazing in this young stallion's territory. He carries on feeding until the females have settled for the day. The foals were all born around the same time. A number of mares are in heat. The young stallion makes his move. The mares seem reluctant to let him get close, but he persists. Sometimes he nearly succeeds. But it's mid-afternoon before he gets his first mating. Bandia, the old stallion from next door, makes his move. The mares watch his approach into the young stallion's territory. From a distance, Bandia brays to catch his rival's attention. The young stallion takes the bait. Luring the young stallion away from the mares, Bandia races across the mudflats with the youngster in hot pursuit. It's well over a mile before the young stallion gives up, leaving the wily Bandia to run back to the mares. The young stallion was already exhausted after a day chasing the reluctant mares. Now he's too tired even to walk back. The mares are much more at ease with Bandia. He'll father some of next year's foals after all. The demoiselle crane's breeding season is well behind them. After their epic autumn migration, they're passing a leisurely winter. Cranes have always come to winter in India, but the huge flocks at the village of Kitchen on the edge of the desert are here by express invitation. As part of their religion, the villagers not only tolerate wild animals, they encourage them. The paler-headed cranes are juveniles, spending their first winter in India. When they return from Central Asia next year, they'll bring young families of their own. As soon as they've eaten all the grain, the cranes leave the feeding compound to spend the day at a nearby water hole. It's too hot and crowded in summer for cranes to breed here, but the Indian desert is a perfect winter resort. Daytime temperatures are in the 70s and only drop to freezing at night. Conditions are pleasant compared to the winter the cranes left behind in Central Asia. The arid heart has been gripped by wintry cold for 3 months, and there are still 3 months to endure. The air is so dry that usually very little snow falls. This year's snow is exceptional. The gazelles that survived the foot rot epidemic forage for dry grass beneath the snow, alongside domestic camels blanketed in winter coats. Temperatures are often in the -20s and can plunge to -60. They're pushed low by the huge Asiatic anticyclone which covers the continent through winter, and by icy wind sweeping down from the Arctic Circle. It's 180 degrees colder than midsummer. The river is frozen, except where Taki have broken through to running water, which steams in the freezing air. The snow is powder dry. Water is as much at a premium as it was in summer. Every couple of days, Taki must come to drink. Food is hard to find beneath the snow. Although the Taki have kept their good condition from summer, with more than 3 months before winter ends, the hardest time is yet to come. The winter has been good for Khan's son Munlai. He's now the dominant stallion of his own small herd of mares. He inherited them by accident when their dominant stallion was overthrown. The mares didn't want to join the victor's herd and instead chose Munlai. In the coming season, Munlai, the firstborn, will sire his own first foals. Up on the hill, his father Khan is still in control. His herd has increased with the arrival of the 4 bachelor stallions whose presence, for the time being, he seems to tolerate. Perhaps greater numbers give better protection from wolves, who are now lean and very hungry. The young stallions vie for status. The bachelors take a special interest in Khan's dung. They roll in the dung, as if covering themselves in Khan's smell will help them rise to his rank. Khan is still the dominant stallion. One day a challenger will overthrow him, but the Khan dynasty is secure. Already his daughters are producing the next Taki generation, and his eldest son leads a herd of his own. The rise and fall of a stallion is as much a part of life for these nomads as the ever-changing seasons. These spirits of the steppe know that just as winter began, so it will end, and the summer to come will bring new life to Asia's frozen heart. Every summer, the burning sun turns much of India into a furnace. The parched land waits for deliverance from the heat, and an unquenchable thirst takes hold. Every pool of water is precious. Soon it too will be gone. There is an old belief in India that when the peacock begins to dance, rain must be on its way. But often the peacock dances in vain, and the temperature soars ever higher. Yet without the heat, there can be no rain. For it is the build-up of hot air rising from the land that will bring cool winds rushing in from the ocean. And riding these winds will come that rain-bearing god of life, the monsoon. February in India's far northeast. The monsoon is still some months away. The Kaziranga floodplain lies cloaked in winter mist. This is a wilderness that has been shaped by countless monsoons. Among the creatures that live under the monsoon's sway are two of the rarest animals in India, the Asiatic wild buffalo and the great one-horned Indian rhinoceros. This young rhino is barely a few days old. It relies entirely on its mother for protection, and she's a fierce guardian. No one is allowed to come close to her calf, not even another rhino. But other rhinos are no real threat to the calf. The danger is from tigers, who will brave the mother's formidable presence to snatch a young rhino. Instinctively, the calf walks just ahead of its mother. Like all rhinos, the mother has poor eyesight, and the calf's best chance of survival is to stay right under her eyes. Every calf is precious. There are only about 2,000 Indian rhinos left in the wild, and 2/3 of them live in this primeval corner of India. On a misty morning, every breath makes them look more like medieval dragons. Kaziranga is a long stretch of swampland sandwiched between the Mikir Hills in the south and the great Brahmaputra River to the north. Over millions of years, the river has played a crucial role in shaping Kaziranga's destiny. The silt that it brings to the floodplain every monsoon makes this a land of exceptional fertility, a paradise for large animals. The luxuriant grasslands that dominate Kaziranga are home to some of the largest elephant herds in India. The grass can grow over 15 feet tall. It provides cover for all the animals and is a staple food for the elephants. Rhinos prefer to feed on the shorter grass of the meadows. This female is on heat and is laying down a seductive urine trail. More than a mile away, a bull has picked up her scent. He follows the trail like a bloodhound. For the male rhino, finding the female is only the beginning. She's a solitary animal and suspicious even of other rhinos. He approaches her cautiously. Her initial reaction is intimidating, but her aggression is part of the courtship ritual. The next step in the courtship is a long chase, her way of testing his mettle. She sets the pace. He must follow. When the male has proved his stamina, she will allow him to mate. Their coupling can last over an hour. If the mating is successful, in 16 months she will give birth to a calf. Lured by the female's trail, another bull appears. The female is tiring under the weight of her mate and is trying to dislodge him. If she succeeds, the intruder may have his chance. Scattered amongst the grasslands are basins of water called beels, favorite fishing spots for pelicans. The floods of the last monsoon replenished the beels and restocked them with fish. With the advance of the dry season, the water levels in the beels start to fall, concentrating the fish and making it easier for the pelicans and the adjutant storks to feed. Soon the stock of fish in the beels will dwindle, and the birds will have to move on. By April it is becoming increasingly hot, and many of the beels have dried up. The ones that still have water bring the normally solitary rhinos together. In the oppressive heat of the day, the wallow is the place to be. Buffaloes also wallow to keep their bodies cool. The mud provides a protective coating against biting insects. Buffaloes are gregarious and like to crowd together, quite unlike the rhinos. When an inquisitive calf approaches the wrong mother, tempers flare. When one mother gives way, peace returns. As temperatures continue to rise, the heat draws in rain clouds. But these pre-monsoon clouds often deliver no more than a drizzle. It's a time of tantalizing anticipation, a time of waiting for the monsoon. The summer monsoon usually arrives in early June, traveling a well-established route. It will come into India as two arms. An eastern arm will rush in from the Bay of Bengal, sweeping over Kaziranga and beyond until checked by the Himalayan mountains. A western arm will come in from the Arabian Sea and make landfall at the tip of southern India, where it will collide with a mountain range called the Western Ghats. On the highest reaches of these mountains lives a rare wild goat, the Nilgiri tahr. For most of the year, the females and their young live in small herds separate from the males. In the dry season, the herds are constantly on the move, scouring the mountain slopes for food. For the young tahr facing their first summer, life is particularly hard. The grass is coarse, and their mother's milk has all but dried up. Luckily, there have been some pre-monsoon showers, and a few clumps of grass have sprouted new shoots. Without this new growth, many young tahr would not survive. The monsoon is not far away, but for now, the only dark clouds on the horizon are clouds of smoke from forest fires on the plains below. In the tinder dry forest, the water holes have been shrinking. The tepid water has been muddied by the many elephant herds that have passed through. It is barely fit to drink, but at least the water will help him to cool off. Every day the fires advance. The flames consume everything on the forest floor, destroying the last edible grasses and shrubs. The fires and the lack of food have driven most of the elephants to the edge of the forest, where there's still some grass. But for animals that each require an average of 400 pounds of food every day, there is scarcely enough. This is the most difficult time of year for the elephants. The old and the weak will not survive. It's a time of easy pickings for the vultures, but the fortunes of the animals may soon be about to change. It is now early June, and a cool wind has sprung up from the southwest. From out over the Arabian Sea, the monsoon finally arrives in South India. From now until September, it will rain almost every day. The spell of the dry season has been broken. Soon there will be plenty of food and water everywhere, and the elephant herds will be able to return to the forest. The monsoon clouds sweep inland until their path is blocked by the towering mountains of the Western Ghats. During the 4 months of the monsoon season, they will drench these slopes with over 20 feet of rain. Over millennia, This heavy rainfall has created an incredibly lush rainforest. Within the forest, the rains awaken life. A Travancore tortoise emerges from its dry season shelter beneath the leaf litter. The rains trigger a new season of activity for the creatures of the forest. Soon there'll be enough water everywhere for the toads to breed. A giant forest snail feeds on the moss that springs up almost overnight on the rocks. A 6-inch long centipede prowls the forest floor in search of food. The venom in its jaws will kill the frog quickly. The centipede is a voracious feeder. In an hour, there will be practically nothing left of the victim. The monsoon brings a bonanza for all the creatures of the rainforest. In the canopy, the lion-tailed macaque is spoiled for choice. For this fruit eater, the monsoon has a special treat in store: jackfruit. A single fruit will provide this young macaque with enough food for a whole day. With coveted food like this, it's best to take it and run. The dominant male of the troop is just waking from a siesta. He'll have no qualms about snatching the fruit. The young macaque must eat as fast as he can. His hurried feeding is manna from heaven for a Travancore tortoise. The fruit is sticky, but the tortoise has all the time it needs to relish it, unlike its nervous benefactor. The dominant male is closing in. The youngster must make good his escape. On the forest floor, a conflict of a different kind is brewing. A fight for mating rights. The older male on the right has moved into the younger male's territory and is meeting stiff resistance. The younger male's spirited defense was of no avail. Having disposed of his rival, the victor comes courting. His sense of smell will tell him if the female is receptive. If she is, he will woo her in his own unique way. The male's techniques for love or war are surprisingly similar. During the monsoon, the male will try and mate with as many females as possible. The rains have filled the streams, and the forest is bursting with an abundance of water. After every shower, the warm forest exhales water vapor back into the atmosphere, adding to the rainfall higher up the mountains where the tar live. The female herds have now swollen with the arrival of adult males, known as saddlebacks, because of the light patch on their backs. For most of the year, they live in bachelor herds. It's only during the monsoon that they join the females. Although some females are still suckling young, most will soon be ready to mate. But before the breeding can start, the tahr must feed on the new monsoon growth to build up their condition. The monsoon is now well established along the west coast of South India, where the rains will continue until September. Deflected by the mountains, the incoming clouds are forced northwards. The monsoon will travel over 1,000 miles up the subcontinent towards the parched lands of northwest India. The incredible heat rising off the desert will help draw the monsoon north. But it may never get here. Some years it can exhaust itself during its long journey. Only a few hardy species like the Indian wild ass manage to survive in this harsh landscape, where summer temperatures can reach 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Desert has claimed large tracts of this part of India. The few remaining pockets of forest lie along the direct path of the monsoon. In these forests there's still a little water left, and the animals take full advantage of it. The rhesus macaques play confidently because during the heat of the day, their arch enemy is asleep in another forest pool. Tigers hate the heat and will spend hours soaking in the water. These arid forests of Rajasthan in northwest India are the hottest areas inhabited by tigers. But despite the crippling heat, not all tigers can afford to loll in the water. This tigress has 2 nearly full-grown cubs, and to keep them fed, she has to hunt constantly. The dry, open forest makes concealment difficult, and stalking almost impossible. Once spotted, there is no point in even trying here. She's an ambush hunter who relies on stealth and surprise to make a kill. Within her territory of 10 square miles is an extraordinary oasis. an ancient man-made lake where the hunting is good. Once her own kind were hunted here. For centuries, this forest of Ranthambore was the hunting preserve of Mughal emperors and Rajput kings. When their dynasties fell, their lodges and palaces reverted to the forest and its animals. The tigress may have given birth to her cubs in one of these ruins. The lake shore is a tiger's dream. Arrayed before her, tantalizingly close, are prey animals of every kind. But she must be extremely careful. One wrong move and the feast could vanish. She will only get one chance to make a kill. The sharp-eyed langur monkeys are the sentinels of the forest, but today they're busy feeding. The tigress has slipped past and will wait for her chance. The sambar deer feeding on waterweeds are unaware of the danger. She has killed a young sambar with a single bite to the back of the neck. Tails raised in alarm, the rest of the sambar scatter. It took a huge burst of energy to make the kill. Now, the tigress must drag the carcass over a mile to where her cubs are waiting. The sambar is easily half her weight, and the stifling heat makes her task more difficult. But at least the kill will feed her family for a couple of days. At last, there is a promise of rain. The peacock's courtship dance becomes more urgent. There's a smell of rain in the air. Under cover of darkness, the monsoon arrives in Rajasthan. In an underground burrow, a female python sits tightly coiled around her clutch of eggs. She laid them 60 days ago, time to hatch with the monsoon. Now she can sense movement within the eggs. Soon she will leave them, never to return. Her young will hatch on their own, They'll have no trouble fending for themselves in this season of plenty. The hatchlings break out of the leathery eggshell with the help of an egg tooth, a razor-sharp protrusion at the tip of the snout. Once they've slit the shell, the hatchlings will stay within the egg for a few more hours to absorb the remaining yolk. The egg tooth will soon fall off. The young pythons are almost 2 feet long when they hatch, big enough to crush a large mouse or a frog. But they will not have to hunt straight away. The yolk stored in their bodies will sustain them for about a week. The young pythons emerge into a world blessed by the monsoon. As the hatchlings leave the burrow, their immediate instinct is to find water. Guided by its sense of smell, the first one out heads for a drink from a fresh puddle of rainwater. Several times during the first few hours, it will try out its jaws. At daybreak, the rain resumes. The downpours continue almost non-stop for a week. A region that has not seen rain for 8 long months drinks deeply. In this arid part of India, the effects of just a few days of rain are dramatic. As soon as the earth softens, winged termites emerge. They've been nurtured in the nest by the smaller worker termites. With the arrival of the monsoon, they're now ready to fly out and start new colonies. The winged termites are packed with protein, nutritious morsels for a pied-crested cuckoo. A myna collects as many as it can for its chicks. The exodus will not last long. Because of the profusion of insects and other food during the monsoon, many birds breed at this time. Peacock chicks have also hatched. While they're busy feeding on insects and grass seeds, their mother keeps a sharp lookout for danger. It's only the mother tigress, and she has no interest in baby peacocks. These days she has time to laze. At last, her cubs are learning to hunt for themselves. This cub still has a lot to learn about the art of stalking. Now the forest is on full alert. But hunger is a great teacher. Stealth and speed will come with practice. Nearby, his sister has found another way to pass the day. But even doing nothing can have its problems. The monsoon has produced a bumper crop of blood-sucking flies, and they are a real nuisance. The monsoon has created a different kind of problem for the mother. The rains have washed away the scent marks she's carefully laid out around her territory. So after every shower, she has to patrol her boundaries and respray her scent. It's a warning to other tigers that this is her domain. One day, when she's ready to have another litter, she'll push even her own cubs out. They'll have to stake their own claims to other parts of the forest. The monsoon has transformed the tiger's forests in Ranthambore. But an even more dramatic change has taken place not far away, where a dusty scrubland has turned into a watery paradise. Bharatpur is India's most famous wetland. Its monsoon-filled marshes are now teeming with fish, food for thousands of water birds that have come to breed. Egrets, herons and cormorants. The most spectacular monsoon visitors are just arriving, the painted storks. Both males and females sport the beautiful breeding colors that give these storks their name. Constant preening keeps them looking their best. Every day, more painted storks arrive to swell the colony. As if to celebrate their coming, the rain clouds reappear. This weather pattern is typical of the summer monsoon. Days of rain alternating with days of heat and humidity. It is this cycle of rain and sunshine that makes the marshes so rich. During a good monsoon, birds breed in extraordinary profusion. In the painted stork colony, almost every nest has 2 or 3 chicks. On the exposed treetops, it can get very hot. The adult birds keep their bills open to prevent overheating. They protect their downy chicks from the sun with their wings. Despite the shading, the chicks get extremely thirsty and constantly beg for relief. Without water, the chicks will die. So every few hours, a parent bird will fill up at the marsh below and ferry water back to the nest. With the diligent care of both parents, the chicks will thrive. The short season of rain in northwest India is practically over. Within 6 weeks of its arrival here, the western arm of the monsoon begins to retreat. But over 1,000 miles to the south, where the rains began 3 months ago, the monsoon is still active. In between the rain showers, the tar rut is at its peak. The pheromones in the air are driving the males into a sexual frenzy. They chase the females relentlessly. With so many females in the herd, the only way for males to find out which ones are still receptive is when a female stops to offer a urine sample. The males, on the other hand, use their urine like an aftershave to advertise their presence. When a male finally finds a receptive female, the mating takes place without much ado. The chases will continue until all the females have mated. Then the males will gradually regroup into bachelor herds and return to their remote crags. The western arm of the monsoon is weakening, but the eastern arm is more vigorous than ever. Stopped short by the great Himalayan ranges, the monsoon continues to drench northeast India and Kaziranga with enormous quantities of rain. It has been raining heavily in Kaziranga for the last 3 months. The beels have been replenished, and the ground is saturated with water. When the rains relent, the heat builds up again. The clouds trap the heat, creating a hothouse that stimulates enormous growth. In the tall grass, a tiger is on the prowl. It's not after the fast-moving deer, but on the trail of something much more vulnerable, a baby rhino. Although the short-sighted mother can't see the tiger, her acute sense of smell has alerted her to its presence close behind. She is torn between chasing off the tiger and staying with her calf. The best way for the rhino to protect her calf is to take refuge in the sea of grass. The tall grass might be a sanctuary against predators, but it will offer no protection against the Brahmaputra River, which has been rising steadily with the monsoon rains. Any day now, it could breach its banks and engulf the grasslands. As more clouds rush in, the downpours intensify in the mountains above Kaziranga. The mountain forests have absorbed all the water they can hold. The runoff is now adding to the already swollen streams. As they plunge down the mountain slopes, the cascades grow ever larger. Finally, the torrents empty into the Brahmaputra. The river rises rapidly and invades the floodplain. The speed of the rising waters catches the animals by surprise, and they make for higher ground. Even this will soon be underwater. To escape the floods, the animals must reach the Mikir Hills to the south. The waters rise higher every hour. Animals that are too slow to escape can be swept away by the flood or drown. Swimming across the vast expanses of water is exhausting. Soon Kaziranga is under 12 feet of water. Only the tips of the tall grass are visible. The high water does not last more than a few days. When the flood waters recede, the toll is revealed. This rhino is one of many creatures that have perished in the floods. The animals that escaped to the hills now return. This is a cycle that has been repeated over millennia, and the animals have adapted to living in a flood-prone environment. Although some have died, most of the creatures of Kaziranga will benefit from the floods. The rich silt and nutrients brought by the flood waters will further enrich the soil. This was the last burst of the monsoon. Now, at the end of September, the season of rain is finally over. But all across the country, its legacy will linger. On the other side of northern India, in the wetlands of Bharatpur, the painted storks have had an exceptional breeding season. More than 5,000 chicks have been reared successfully. The chicks are now almost as big as their parents and are hungrier than ever. Thanks to the bounty of the monsoon, a whole new generation of painted storks is ready to take wing. All around, the marshes are bursting with the arrival of tens of thousands of waterfowl from Siberia, Mongolia, and China. The birds have escaped the approaching icy winters in their faraway homelands. They come year after year to feast on the gifts of the Indian monsoon. Over the winter months, they feed in the marshes. When the land begins to warm up, the travelers leave. As the temperature continues to rise, the lushness of the monsoon begins to fade. Everywhere, the water starts drying up. The forests wilt. The last puddles evaporate, stranding all the creatures within, and the very life is sucked from the ground. Once again, the long wait will begin for the monsoon, India's god of life. In the warming sun of late spring, a mother rests after giving birth. Her new daughter is only 6 hours old. But their rest will be brief, for they belong to a troop of the northernmost monkeys on Earth, always on the move through the temperate forest that is their home. Both the lives of the macaques and the trees that they live with are ruled by the timing and the changing of the seasons of the temperate world. Much of Asia is covered by the temperate forests that stretch from the foothills of the Himalaya to the islands of Japan. These forests lie in a broad band between the frozen wastes of the Arctic and the humid tropical forests far to the south. There are two kinds of temperate forests, those that remain evergreen and the deciduous forests where the changing seasons are clearly seen. As the earth swings closer to the sun and then away again, the plants and the animals of the temperate forests are exposed to all the climate's extremes. Long ago, when much of the world was frozen in the winter of the last ice age, many trees became extinct. But some of Eastern Asia escaped this ice, and there the temperate forests now contain a greater number of tree species than in the rest of the continent. In Japan, these forests still cover vast areas of her mountains. Forests of cherry and maple, of oak and beech are driven by the seasons, and trees must evolve strategies for survival. In northern Japan, beech trees dominate the forest. They've evolved a strategy of living long, growing taller than the other trees, and reacting quickly to the lengthening days of spring. Beech trees are amongst the earliest to bud, amongst the first to flower, to be pollinated by the wind, and the first to send out leaves to claim the energy-giving light before it reaches the forest floor. But rather than trying to compete for light against the taller trees, one extraordinary plant steals a march on the rest of the forest by following a timetable of its own. The few Japanese who know this plant call it nani-wazu. Instead of shedding its leaves in autumn, nani-wazu keeps them green. They're ready as soon as spring comes to take in sunlight while the canopy overhead is still open. Its precocious flowers attract the first pollen-bearing insects of the season. By breaking the rules of the seasons, nani-wazu knows its own summer. while other plants have just begun to grow their spring leaves. For the forest birds, it will soon be time to breed. A female great spotted woodpecker searches for insects that have throughout the winter sheltered under the bark. Spring reveals a myriad of strategies to deal with the changing seasons. A tiny caterpillar climbs up from the leaf litter where it hibernated over winter. But the colors that were a perfect camouflage in autumn will soon be dangerously conspicuous, for the caterpillar is climbing back into a changing world. To survive, the caterpillar must follow suit. Responding, like the forest, to the lengthening hours of daylight and the rising temperature, it sheds the skin that looks like a dead leaf and assumes the colors of a spring leaf. The caterpillar mimics the leaves on which it will keep feeding until it undergoes its final transformation into a butterfly of summer. All through the forest, trees are exploding into flower. After the long winter months, spring is a time when Japanese macaques make the most of the forest's bounty. Macaques are perhaps the most adaptable of all monkeys. They've colonized many parts of Asia, from the tropics to the temperate forests, adapting and changing as they went. They first arrived in Japan perhaps 500,000 years ago. Japanese macaques live in troops and move within a defined territory. There are 35 animals in this troop, made up of a handful of males and 2 family groups of related females, each led by an older matriarch. This female is about 26 years old. Her knowledge of the forest has been vital, not only for her immediate family, but for the troop as a whole. Japanese macaques are different from other macaques. They're less inclined to squabble than their cousins who live in tropical forests. These macaques are mainly vegetarian, but edible plants are widely scattered throughout the forest. To get enough to eat, the troop must continually move through its territory. What's even more unusual is the degree of tolerance between the male macaques. Ito, at 16 years old, is unchallenged as the senior male of the troop, even though he lost one of his legs in a trap when he was young. He usually stays on the fringes of the family groups, constantly watching. The family group is the very heart of macaque society, and once a female is born into a group, she will never leave. Young males, however, will leave when they're around 5 years old. They will roam the forest, either living a solitary life or in small bachelor groups, before attempting to join another troop with females. In this troop, as well as Ito, there are 2 other big males. Konzui is 15. Like Ito, he never takes his eyes off the females. And on the very fringes of the troop is another male who has recently joined the group. Only 11 years old, he always keeps his distance, but is a member of the troop, accepted within their territory. The ancestors of these macaques arrived in Japan's far north at the end of the most recent ice age. As the earth warmed, macaques moved further and further north into new territories. The northern shores of Japan's main island of Honshu are as far north as any macaque can go. They will not return to the south, since their territory adjoins that of other macaque troops. These northernmost monkeys on Earth have had no choice but to adapt to the seasonal extremes of the temperate forest where they live. Spring comes late to the north of Japan. It was at the end of May when the new baby female was born. She's now 3 days old and is in safe hands. Macaques give birth only to a single infant at a time. A mother couldn't carry or care for more than one. Babies are born at the time that gives them the best chance of growing strong and independent before winter. For then there would be little food, and a mother would be unable to produce enough milk to keep an infant alive. In the gentle spring sun, the baby explores the warm world that is her mother. She starts to make out the light and shade of the forest. She has been born with a strong instinct to grasp and strong hands to do so. For almost from the moment of birth, she must be able to cling to her mother as she moves through the forest with the rest of the troop. As the females move on, sometimes calling softly to each other, Ito follows. He may be the oldest male, but he's not the leader of the troop. In fact, they have no leader. The forest, too, is moving. The days are longer, and the canopy is full, filtering out much of the light from the forest floor. So, for the out-of-step Nani Wazoo, it's time to shut down. Unable to win the race for the light, it begins to discard its leaves in an autumn of its own. But the rest of the forest is reacting to the sun that is rising ever higher in the sky. On the rich spring leaves of a hackberry tree, the caterpillar that emerged from the leaf litter has grown large and plump. Triggered by a combination of the rising temperature and its own internal body clock, it nears the end of one phase of its life and begins to discard a skin it no longer needs. It will never again feed on leaves, so it drops the head and mouth parts it no longer needs. Inside the hardening outer case of the pupa, the body will undergo an amazing transformation, the timing of which is crucial. For when it emerges as a butterfly, it favors tree sap, which is at its most abundant in summer. It still remains aware of the outside world and is ready to respond to it. A single ant is hardly a threat, but a swarm might be. The nervous reaction is enough to startle almost any predator. After 2 weeks, a butterfly emerges. It's a female. The males have already appeared and established their territories. She rids herself of excess moisture in her body, then rests for a few hours to let her wings dry. And she's ready to find a mate in the summer forest. Almost imperceptibly, the forest too is changing. The green of summer is darker than in spring. There are frequent summer rains. The days are long and warm, and food is abundant for the macaques. With a birth of 4 babies, 3 of them males, there are now 39 animals in the troop. Prompted by the warmth of the summer days, these northern macaques start to molt their winter coats. Each individual is different. Some hardly molt at all, while others, like the 26-year-old matriarch, are losing almost all their winter coats. Ito has shed his thick winter fur. Because he seldom mixes with the family groups, when he needs a scratch, he has to do it himself. Within the family groups, the related females groom each other. Grooming is the activity which is at the very bedrock of macaque society. This constant and tender loving care forms bonds and alliances between individuals that will last a lifetime. While still producing milk, some nursing mothers hardly molt their winter coats at all, and having thick fur gives a baby more to cling to. In northern Japan, summer is short. These northernmost monkeys on Earth are best adapted to the season which will last the longest, the harsh winter months that lie ahead. It's now late June. The babies are almost a month old. As their mothers rest, they begin to explore their forest world. But the last to be born, a baby boy, is still not keen to stray from his mother. The baby girl, the firstborn, is more adventurous. She's already climbing up into the forest. It's a new world, full of wonders. Even at this age, they learn to watch and listen to other members of their family group. And just like any child in summer, if there's a stream handy, the juveniles will take a dip while the grown-ups are relaxing. They're careful not to lose contact with their parents. The moment the adults start to move on, the youngsters follow. Midsummer is now approaching, and the trees are at the peak of their growth cycle. The canopy is thick, but with the tall trees absorbing almost all the light, Nani Wazoo has closed down completely. In a winter of its own, a single berry is the only sign that this extraordinary plant is anything more than a dead stick in the forest. But in the beeches and other trees, sap is flowing. And where it leaks from a wound in the bark, the tree's loss is the insect's gain. The food source is so precious to a male butterfly, he doesn't hesitate to challenge any rival, even a hornet. By opening his wings, the butterfly tries to scare off the intruder. Male beetles fight over the same sap hole. The trees are at their most productive, but summer is short, and these rich feeding sites won't last long. Throughout the summer forest, similar battles are fought and lost. Two male butterflies wrestle over the prize. They have only a few precious weeks to find a mate, and every moment counts. What may be a whole lifespan for an insect is just a passing heartbeat in the life of the forest. Yet the destinies of both are ruled by the same seasonal cycle. Already the days are shortening. The forest is preparing for a time of crucial change. Deciduous trees measure their lives in only 2 seasons: a season for productivity and growth, and a season for rest. On the high ridges, the first trees are getting ready for that season of rest, as every day the sun sinks slightly lower in the sky. Some time ago they stopped producing new leaves. Now they prepare to shed them. At the same time, they produce fruits and nuts, which contain the seeds of a new generation. Waiting for this autumn harvest are a host of forest animals. At night, the forest belongs to small and silent hunters like the dormouse. They feed alone, fiercely driving off rivals. Insects are rich in protein and an important food source, but they become scarcer as the temperatures continue to fall. But not all go quietly. A dormouse may only live for 2 or 3 years, and whether it survives for another season will depend on how much weight it gains before going into hibernation, a winter sleep that may last 5 months. If the dormouse does not put on enough fat, it might never wake up. Autumn is also a most important season for the macaques. They too are trying to gain weight for the coming winter. They can't hibernate. To make sure they get the fruit while it's there, they move almost continuously throughout their large territory, from one fruiting area to the next. These northern forests are a relatively poor habitat. Although food is abundant for the moment, the period of plenty will be short-lived. There's no time or energy to waste on squabbling. The Japanese macaques' unique tolerance of each other is perhaps one born of necessity. By early November, the firstborn baby is almost 6 months old and is learning to fend for herself. The timing of her birth was critical, for if she wasn't independent by now, she would not survive the coming winter. None of the 4 babies of spring can ever rest for long, for as food becomes scarcer, the troop spends even more time on the move. Other forest animals go further than just feeding on fallen fruits and nuts. They build up a winter stockpile. A squirrel, always on the alert for predators, peels a walnut before taking it away to store for winter. A jay also prepares for the winter. If the acorns are too light, the jay discards them. The ones that make the grade it will store in its crop, before carrying them off to bury in its territory, which could be as far as half a mile away. But the jay, like the squirrel, often forgets the hiding place, and some of the undiscovered nuts will germinate and grow. The jay carries the seeds far from the parent tree. Slowly, the forest is being moved. Autumn is taking hold throughout the northern forests. The trees have stopped producing sap. The leaves of deciduous trees are thin and are designed to be discarded. This loss of leaves is a fundamental part of the tree's life cycle. The changing color is a chemical reaction. As the chlorophyll in the leaves breaks down, the trees take back what nutrients they need, but the toxins which remain in the leaves are dropped with them. Each tree turns a distinctive color. Some maples go a brilliant red, while the beech, amongst the last to change, turns yellow and brown. Yet even as the beech trees are shutting down for winter, their buds, like time capsules of spring, are in place. The beech forests reach down to the coast, the northern limits of the macaques' domain. As more and more leaves drop away, light can once again penetrate to the forest floor. This is the season for which Nani Wazoo has been waiting. Now it pushes out new leaves to soak up the winter sun unobstructed by the forest canopy. Before long, Nani Wazoo will be covered by snow, but beneath this blanket, its leaves will remain green, ready to receive light as soon as the thaw sets in. For the baby macaque, this is a new season of strange colors and leaves that are no longer good to eat. She's still finding out about her changing world, still unsteady on her feet. Whenever they do rest, the family groups indulge in grooming each other. Like a toddler competing for attention, the firstborn baby throws a tantrum and is put firmly in her place. Younger males are particularly keen to ally themselves with males who are older by grooming them. Gonzui, the second oldest male in the troop, relaxes in sheer pleasure. The constant grooming serves a practical as well as social purpose. It helps maintain a warm and insulating coat, as well as getting rid of parasites like lice and ticks. The old matriarch is groomed by one of her daughters, while juveniles groom each other. grooming interludes are brief, for the troop is continually moving. Picking up her infant, a female follows. Another infant, still too young to walk long distances, hitches a ride. Like the forest, the lives of the macaques are governed by the seasons. Autumn is the time to mate. Gonzui displays his presence, then goes to look for a female. His face now a deep red. Gonzui is in his breeding colors. He moves through the family groups, checking which females are coming onto heat. When females do come into estrus, their faces also turn a deeper red. When a couple pair off, they move away to the edge of the group to mate. Usually it's the female who takes the initiative. The male will be interested in her only during the week or so that she's on heat. The oldest male, Ito, is also eager to mate. In many macaque societies, the senior male can have the female of his choice. But with Japanese macaques, older and more experienced males don't always get their way. When Ito approaches a female, she's not enthusiastic. Even though she's on heat, she rejects him. It's often the females who have the final say. This year, all the younger ones chased the 11-year-old male. Her body language is obvious. First, she tenderly grooms him. Then, when he tries to move off, she stops him. Meanwhile, Ito doesn't give up and looks for another female. Unlike the younger male who's receiving all the attention, Ito has to groom a female, something he normally does not do. But while she's happy to accept his grooming, she refuses any further advances. This female also knows what she wants. She's chosen Gonzui as her mate. Yet, in another week, she'll have nothing further to do with him. The 4 babies have no interest in the activities all around them as they play together, and what they get up to is of no interest to the males, who probably don't even know who their children are. Mating for these northern macaques must take place at the right time. Too soon and the babies will arrive before spring when it's still cold and there's little food. Too late, and the babies won't be mature enough to survive the coming winter. As the troop heads off again for new feeding grounds, Ito makes one more hopeful display. Like the macaques, the seasons too are always moving. Cold winds start to blow in from Siberia, a chilling taste of what's in store. The first of the winter snow slurries blows in. Although it's still too early for snow to settle, winter is about to tighten its grip on northern Japan. But to the north of these temperate forests, the winter is far more severe. Like leaves blown before the Siberian gales, refugees arrive from Arctic Asia in their tens of thousands. White-fronted geese, swans and ducks seek out the few northern lakes that will not completely freeze over. No matter how harsh the winter gets here, the one they've escaped from will be far worse. The leaves on one maple linger to the last, a final reminder of the colors of autumn. Below, the forest floor has surrendered to the cold that will endure for 5 more months. The shortest day of the year is still some way off, but already the forest has shut down. These northern macaques no longer have any natural predators. Their biggest threat is winter itself. But the freezing winter temperatures are a hardship their thick fur and larger body mass have prepared them for. This is the season they have adapted to survive. These are indeed the monkeys of the snow. Grooming is still as pleasurable as ever, and an older animal may also provide some shelter from the wind to younger macaques. The 26-year-old female has been through all this before. She may live to see 4 or 5 more winters. In the deep snows, the macaques move only when they must. Each journey drains heat and costs energy. Over the winter months, a macaque can lose as much as 20% of its body weight. They stay in the trees as much as they can. It's easier to travel, and they lose less heat through their hands and feet. They rely for nourishment mainly on the bark of trees. For spring's first baby, winter has been a rude shock. But she learns from her mother and sisters which trees have the best bark, and where those trees are in the bare forest. It's a lesson she will rely upon for the rest of her life. Where they can, the macaques supplement their diet by eating winter buds. But these macaques seldom stay in one place long enough to do permanent damage to the forest. The beech trees keep their buds safe within a hard outer case which can withstand the freezing temperature. Inside, the new leaves wait for the longer days of spring that will trigger their growth. The seeds that have dropped to the forest floor lie beneath an insulating blanket of snow, which keeps the temperature constant. These seeds need a prolonged period of cold before they germinate, almost as if they can recognize the time when spring is approaching. Like the macaques that live in them, the trees have adapted to the long months of winter. Across the broad expanse of forest, everything seems in retreat. Yet winter is a time which forces activity, and animals that are seldom seen must come out in the open to eat. In spring and summer, when the trees are in leaf, it's very rare to see this animal, the Japanese serow. It's an ancient species endemic to Asia. Its closest relatives are members of the goat family. Calves stay with their mothers for a year or so, but as adults, they're mostly solitary. In winter, the serows move out from the forest and forage on the southern slopes, warmed by the winter's sun. On these slopes, where there's slightly less snow, they dig for whatever they can find to eat. Like the macaques, they also eat bark and the winter buds of trees. The ancestral forms of these strange animals have a fossil record dating back millions of years. They too are adapted perfectly to the cycle of the seasons. To find food, the macaques must move every day. But when the air temperature drops below freezing, they try to move as little as possible. At these temperatures, the snow will cling to their hands and feet, draining even more of their body heat away. Drawing on her memory and knowledge of the forest, an old female knows the way to a new feeding site. The rest of the troop share her knowledge. Ito is content to bring up the rear, closely followed by a young male, keen to learn from his age and experience. Once they arrive at a feeding site, they all climb into the trees away from the cold of the clinging snow. Only in winter do they sit this close for a prolonged period. Even though temperatures are still well below freezing, the sun is once again climbing higher into the sky, and the days are beginning to lengthen. The squirrels' autumn preparations have paid off. During the few hours that they're active each morning, they search for the remaining walnuts they buried before the snows came. Guided first by memory and then by a keen sense of smell, a squirrel retrieves a walnut and takes it to the safety of a tree to eat. It can take as long as 30 minutes to crack open a nut, but the prize is worth the effort. Forest birds have also remained active throughout the winter, and while pickings may be lean, nothing goes to waste. A freezing mist rises into the morning air, and as the days continue to lengthen, some trees begin to pump sap. But the air temperature is still many degrees below freezing, cold enough for icicles to form. Where maple branches have broken in a storm, icicles of sweet sap take shape, creating a tempting delicacy for small birds. Each icicle may last only a few days. The rising temperatures mean that even as a Japanese white-eye licks at it, the frozen delicacy is already melting. Throughout the forest, winter begins to lose its grip. But this interval between seasons is still dangerous for the trees. Their soft new shoots are moist and vulnerable. A sudden frost or freezing snowstorm could easily kill them, and the tree's long preparation for spring would be wasted. Gradually across the forest, the thaw takes hold. Insects are returning, and with them, their predators. The melting snows reveal Naniwazu, ready to greet the returning sun. Following its own unique seasonal cycle, its flowers are already waiting to be pollinated. Its leaves are absorbing sunlight before the canopy again closes over. In the rhythm of the forest and the seasons, Naniwazu dances to its own beat. The late winter sun warms the trunks of the beeches, and with the dripping meltwater, there's bare earth at the base of the trees. And tiny spring ephemerals take their one chance to bloom. Like the strange Naniwazu, they can only compete by staying a step ahead of their rivals. The melting snow reveals more and more leaf litter. Deep in the litter, curled like a ball, the dormouse has spent the 5 months of winter in a sleep which is close to death. Its body temperature has remained almost at freezing. It has breathed only 4 or 5 times an hour. As warmth returns, it stirs and begins to wake. It shivers to regain body warmth. Its heartbeat increases from its resting rate of 50 beats a minute to 500. It has survived on the reserves of fat from the previous autumn, but has lost much of its body weight. With a metabolic rate so fast, it must eat or die. As soon as it wakes, it returns to a forest that is exploding with color and life. orchestrated precision of a symphony, the forest reacts to spring. Dogtooth violets bloom just in time to attract their pollinator, a butterfly which the Japanese call the goddess of spring. Unlike the butterfly of summer, the spring goddess feasts on nectar, distributing pollen as it flies from one flower to the next. All the macaques of the troop have survived winter, and more will be born this spring. For the juveniles, it's time once again to play. The seasons of the temperate world have completed another cycle. Once again, there is plenty of food. The firstborn baby of last spring has lived the first 4 seasons of her life. As she grows, she will never cease learning about her forest from her mother and family. One day she too will choose a mate and give birth. She may grow to become the matriarch of a family group, using her knowledge and experience to guide future generations through the changing seasons of the forest, as the forest, in its turn, follows the ancient rhythms of Asia's temperate world.